Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 6 of season 3 of The Walking Dead called Hounded. I've kind of got some mixed feelings about this episode. It's not that there are a lot of things in this episode that I can really point to as being bad. It's just, at the end of it, I don't really feel very... I just basically don't really feel very jazzed. This episode had some really great moments, but I just kind of it just kind of was for me. But well, let's talk about what's going on here, and maybe I'll be able to articulate my point a little bit better as we go along. So my first, of course, we're introduced to Merle and his gang of I don't know if I exactly want to call these guys red shirts, because two of them have been around since for several episodes and have names and stuff like that. But whatever. Merle and his crew going after Michonne. Now, I really have to sort of wonder why the governor has such a mad-on to to take out Michonne. Now, yes, she does seem to have very clearly sniffed out his true nature. On the other hand, she's one person who's, even by Merle's own estimation, strolling right into a place that's absolutely crawling with walkers. So, really, exactly why does the governor think that she's a threat? I'm reminded of something I was reading over on crack.com a couple weeks ago, and it was talking about the Jason Bourne movies, and they basically said, why is it that time and time again the CIA goes and screws with Jason Bourne, even though he's proved that he can screw with them even worse back, and that, of all the people you could try and pin a crime on or anything, why do you really want to do it to this insanely super skilled master assassin spy guy? And if they just left Jason Bourne alone, they could have saved themselves a lot of misery. Now, my point here is, of course, that if the governor just lets Michonne go, then what exactly is he risking here? That she might go out and tell people that he's a bad guy? Well, okay, it's pretty obviously that Michonne would do that, but she's just one person, and it's just her word against his. She doesn't really have any proof that he's actually done anything, otherwise she would have presented it to Andrea. And it's just she has a feeling that he's a bad guy. Now, here's why I think is going on, and this is really in keeping with the governor's personality, is that he just can't stand the idea that there's someone who has defied his control, someone who has seen through to his true nature. And that alone is enough for him to want to take Michonne out of the picture. The governor is just really a big control freak. Now, another thing that I think becomes really clear about the governor this episode is when he's talking about how he's also left the good things from his old life behind. The governor is a man who has really reinvented himself. Might not is a little bit of an understatement. Maybe I guess regenerated, if you're a fan of Doctor Who, or if you can pardon me for getting very flighty with a metaphor, a guy who has really in a way been reborn. He has, of course, left behind all of his bad memories of his old life, but he's also left behind all of the good things from his old life. And he's really, in many ways, shucked his humanity. He has become a creature, really is the best word to describe him, who, like the walkers, is really nothing more than a being that seeks only to survive in this world. And while the walkers strive to survive by feeding, the governor tries to survive by controlling. And I have said in my previous reviews that in some ways what he's got is going on with Andrea is very much the way like cult leaders draw people in. Slowly they introduces his agenda little by little. Every time he has a perfectly reasonable explanation for it. He's he really knows how to sugarcoat things, and he really knows how to present things that so that these things that do seem very extreme also seem very logical and reasonable. And here, the seduction of Andrea becomes quite the literal one. Surprising to see the show that much skin, but well, I guess I should say I'm surprised to see that much skin on a show that isn't something like Dexter. This is the first time I've watched a show on AMC, so I don't know how they do it on Mad Men, but okay, let's just say that I was surprised by that. Now, Merle, since we're talking about the folks in Woodbury, excuse me a sec. That's some good Earl Grey. The choice beverage of French starship captains with British accents everywhere. Now, Merle. First of all, of course, Merle gets the big confirmation that yes, indeed, Daryl is alive. And that was something I was really looking forward to. His happiness at that is pretty palpable. But in a way, Merle is a guy who has also changed. Now, we've talked about the way Merle has changed. He's a guy who has demonstrated virtues like loyalty and cooperativeness. I mean, he even properly thanked Andrea when she gave him information about his brother. But the thing is, though, that virtues, despite what people say, that virtues like loyalty and bravery, those are not virtues that are exclusive to good people, despite what people will tell you. They're, to put it simply, things like that, like bravery, as I've said, not in my previous reviews, but actually just in real life, is a neutral virtue. Bad people can be brave. Bad people can be loyal. Bad people can show gratitude to the people who have done them right in their lives. Being a bad person does not automatically mean that you're like the Emperor from Star Wars, that you just go around cackling and doing evil every opportunity for the sake of doing evil. That's what cartoon characters do. That's not what real people do. And Daryl and the governor, these are all perfect examples of this. They are bad people who nonetheless do have some good traits. Of course, Merle did sort of shoot himself in the foot there. If he had really just agreed to stay there and wait a couple hours, then all of this really could have been avoided. But, Merle has more on his mind than just his brother. He does have the greater agenda of the governor on his mind, and that's, of course, to me, the main reason why he took Glenn and Maggie prisoner. Now, I gotta say, folks, as I have repeatedly said, I've read the comics, and I know they've brought in some pretty serious changes to the storyline, but I remember the prison storyline well enough that I'm really worried for Maggie, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. Hey, before we move on, speaking of the population of Woodbury, didn't the governor say it was something like 78 people? Now, is it just me, or does it seem like all 78 of those people seem to be hanging out on the one main street of Woodbury at virtually all times? I mean, look at the number of extras you see hanging around in the back of this show. I think somebody has not done their math properly, or at least didn't think that through very well. Now, Andrea, as long as we're kind of in that general vein, her jumping off the wall like that, Andrea is obviously somebody who is very desperate to prove her worth. I mean, she spent how long being looked after by Michonne? She's, in that time, doubtlessly grown to feel kind of useless, kind of helpless. And here in Woodbury, not only has she found a place where there's a sense of normalcy, there's a sense of safety, there's decent food, there's people who are unusually clean. It's probably about as good as life in the Walking Dead world gets. And it's no wonder that Andrea not only wants to stay there in that good and apparently safe seeming place, she wants to be someone who commands respect, who has a role, someone who contributes in a serious way to the group, in the way that she eventually proved herself to be a pretty capable fighter with Rick's group. But of course, that all feeds into the governor's ability and desire to manipulate her. And well, there's no way, shape, or form that's not going to end very ugly. I really do wish we'd gotten a name for that girl, incidentally, that was hanging out on the wall with the really badass looking bow. It looks it looks an awful lot like the one my stepdad uses. He's a bow hunter, and he's taken down deer with that thing. I've seen him. I've seen him dressing them and eating the rather delicious deer steaks that he made from them. So the reason that I'm thinking about this is because I can't help but wonder if maybe she might, in some small way, be the television version of the character of Lily. And if you're familiar with the comics, you know who Lily is. And if you've been playing the Walking Dead video game, which I highly, highly recommend, it's awesome. Although, man, God, is Kenny a dick? But no, seriously, if you've played the Walking Dead video game, you definitely would know who Lily is. And you would also definitely know that Kenny is a dick. But anyway, let's move on. Sorry, my throat's unusually dry today. I'm not sure why. Now, the conversation, moving over to what happened at the prison, the conversation between Daryl and Carl. Now, that was some really nice stuff. We haven't really seen a huge amount of interaction between Daryl and Carl in quite a while. And let's see, they're never really, they're in general not too, they are in general two characters who haven't really bounced off each other too much. The story about the death of Daryl's mother. Some really nice stuff here about him. Really adds to his character. I'm sure all the Daryl fans out there just love the guy even more. And of course, the scene with him finding Carol. How does that not warm your heart? Those two characters, I like how they're not in a romantic relationship, but there is this very strong bond between them. This very strong connection. They do care about each other very deeply. And I'm also kicking myself a little bit for not realizing that the grave that Daryl dug the other week was actually supposed to be for Carol. But that kind of brings me back to a point I forgot to mention in my review from the other week. Is as I've said, they never found Carol's body, but they just sort of assumed she was dead on what I think is frankly some pretty flimsy evidence. And of course, because they just assumed she was dead, there was no body for them to bury. But how is it that that one walker in the boiler room was able to completely and utterly eat the body of a grown woman? Bones and all. I mean, not to be really graphic and gross here, but where the heck did the skull go? Where did the pelvic bone go? I mean, don't tell me that thing was in that guy's stomach, too. Now, granted, I imagine that even on a show like this, there are limits to just how gory they might want to get. If you've ever played the video game Dead Island, you can see a pretty good example of what I would think it would be. I'm a kind of a little hesitant to use the word realistic take on what might happen if zombies were to chow down on a human body, but that's the only word that really comes to my mind. It is a little strange to try and say that's an unrealistic way for a zombie to eat a human body. Yeah, that's the thrills and chills, the ups and downs, and the perils of reviewing genre television, folks. You should hear about some of the. If you're not one of my viewers from the superhero animated shows and such that I review, you would probably be surprised at the number of times I sit down and just rant about ridiculously unrealistic things in shows about people who fly around in masks and tights and have superpowers. But again, that is simply the nature of fandom. And after that completely unnecessary aside, it's time to move on. Oh yeah, there was one other thing that I almost forgot about what's going on with Michan that I almost forgot to talk about. Now, remember in the very early episodes when I believe it was the episode Guts, where Rick and Glenn smear a bunch of zombie guts on themselves so that they can go and carry out a mission in Atlanta. So apparently, in all those months that Andrea was with Michonne, she never bothered to share the whole information that smearing zombie guts on yourself is a good way to camouflage yourself. Seriously, Andrea, you don't think that's important information that Michonne might have found helpful and useful? Really? Okay, look, I'm really not blaming the character of Andrea for this. I'm blaming the people who are writing the show because that's just stupid. There is no logical reason for Andrea to have not shared important information that she was privy to. I mean, it really is just stupid. And let's see. Of course, we have the situation with Rick and the phone. Now, first of all, I'm glad that they didn't try and drag this out. As a reader of the comics, I was kind of a little worried about how they were going to show that because, that's something that went on for a while in the comics. It was for several issues before it became really clear what happened. Now, in the comics, of course, that's a much easier sell. Comic books are generally only 22 pages a pop. Here, TV episodes are roughly 44 to 42 minutes a pop. So, I'm glad that they didn't really dick around with that too much. And, well, it's certainly not that the stuff was badly written, and it certainly wasn't that Andrew Lincoln didn't do some really great acting there. It's just that scene, despite all it had going for it, just for some reason that I really can't put into words, it just didn't work for me. I even hate to say it, and I do hate to say this, but it seemed to me just to be a little bit dumb. And that is really disappointing for a season that has really been so tight, so well written, and so entertaining so far. But at the end of the day, despite the best efforts of actors and writers and directors and all this, sometimes there's just going to be a scene that for whatever reason doesn't quite work. And, maybe there are some of you out there feel completely different than me. And that's perfectly fine. We're all entitled to our own opinions. But I'm just saying, for me, Rick and the phone, it just didn't work. But still, I have a feeling that the series is definitely going to pick back up next episode. Next episode, I'm thinking, is going to be some very, very intense stuff. If for no other reason than we finally get to see Michonne and Rick together. And yeah, this promises to be the start of some serious badassery on the parts of many people. So with that said, folks, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.